So very much indeed, and of course it's good to know I'm a loved person. That's only my wife who would normally tell me that, but thank you very much indeed. At least there are 20 million people here in Delhi, so that's great. So thank you very much indeed, and truly honored to be able to give you an address today. And may I thank all the good friends sitting on the dais and also the spectators attending this very, very important summit. I put on a green tie, and it's not just to make myself happy, but it's also really to walk the talk a little bit. And I try to take you a little bit through how we see it in Denmark and how I see it and why passion is needed to really bridge the divide. And let me start by saying that this north-south divide is really damaging to what I would call the global efforts to solve the issues that are so important for the future of this planet and consequently for all of us. So can we do something about it? Yes. Should we do something about it? Yes. Why aren't we then doing enough about it? We had just an initial talk here about the 1.5 degree kind of objective, and of course it's nice to have these one-liners, but by the end of the day it's the action that counts. And it might be cooler some parts of the world, it might be warmer and hotter, and I'm especially also privileged that perhaps it's a bad joke, but there's a cyclone devastating some parts of Africa, and it has been given the name of Freddy. So I hope at least I'll not be a cyclone to your thinking, but at least I will try to take you a little bit through what we are doing. When I grew up in Denmark, I was born on a farm, so I know how to milk a cow. We were growing sugar beets and so forth. And in the early 1970s, suddenly, our dream of a fantastic welfare-based society came to an end. Why? Because the suppliers of oil from the Middle East suddenly decided to switch off the supply. And I recall that we were not allowed to use our farming devices, we were not machines, we were not allowed to drive cars, all the lifts were stopped, the escalators were stopped. And then I think we realized that dependency on, at least at that time, the only major energy source was quite a challenge. That led visionary politicians, that led, let's say, forward-looking business people and researchers to look into how could we reduce the dependency on that. And then we developed what we call the kind of clean tech. And Denmark became, at that time, one of the front runners into, I see our wind turbine, and wind is the big thing in Denmark. So at that time, we were forced to change our trajectory. We did not do it because we had a political will. We did not do it because we were caring about the planet and the climate as such. We were forced to do it. Years later, Denmark has really become the front runner in clean green energy. Last year, more than 55% of all electricity consumed in Denmark came from wind alone. And then on top of that, you have the other sources of revenue of renewables. So basically, many days of the years, Denmark Denmark is really driven by green renewable energy. We have built up a double-digit, multi-billion US dollar industry. We've created millions of jobs inside Denmark, outside Denmark, through this greening of our society. And that's a very strong argument for others really to follow it. I've spent many years in India. In fact, I'm here on my 10th year as an ambassador in 2 tenures. And I have seen with great proudness how India has developed. I came to Gujarat first time back in 2011, met the then Chief Minister. We had, in fact, May 2011, we had a long discussion about green development. And there I found a dedication, a wish for a change. And in India, it's not about being forced to do it. like in many other developing countries. It's a political choice. See what your Honourable Prime Minister did at COP26 in Glasgow, tabling huge ambitions. Was he forced to it? No. Was there people who were objecting to it internally and outside? Yes, of course. Because how can a developing country, how can they just put so much of efforts, so much of ambitions into a green trajectory? But your Prime Minister stood on it. And 1st of February this year, I was sitting in the Prime Minister's office. And when the Finance Minister, Finance Minister was introducing the Union budget proposal, then suddenly something which we have been arguing for a long time suddenly was mentioned, green growth. And here you have a society, 1.4 billion, the most populated nation of this planet, now really focusing on green growth. Green solutions, fine, but that's not the only answer. So you need really, if you want this, what you call it out here, Viksit Bharat, to really come into the emergence, then of course you need to have a green trajectory. India has the G20 presidency. I hope, I pray literally that India will be extremely successful, at least in changing some of the structures, whether it's financial structures, whether it's global structures, so we have a better way of dealing with these big challenges that we are all facing. And the only chance of bridging the divide between North and South is through cooperation. So I hope, despite whatever global issue, and Moses also referred to that, could divide us, I still hope that we will be able to clinch some kind of agreement. Also tackling the climate issue, because without tackling that, we will not be able to at least hand over a planet to our next generations that is worth living at. So we have to do something more importantly. The issue of loss and damage was raised. Some of you might recall that COP15, in fact, happened in Denmark. It was in November, December. It's extremely cold in 2009. And one of my good friends out in India, Jairam Ramesh, whom I just met the other night, was complaining about everything when he was the minister in charge in 2009. He said it was cold, food was awful, nothing came out of it. And it's to some extent true. Not that food is not good in my country, but perhaps for an Indian it was not the best choice anyhow. But what is more important here, at that COP15, the developed world made a commitment of $100 billion per year for the developing countries. You know, I know, we never have delivered upon it. And it's really a scandal that we did not live up to our commitments. Now we are talking about, really, it's perhaps a late hour, or it's already too late to do something about it. But had we really stood up to our commitments at that time, perhaps we could have had or added a little bit more extra years to a better life for, not for me, but for our next generations and so forth. And perhaps we could have avoided this north-south divide. Don't know, could at least think about it. The Danish government went out last year and said, we are ready to look into loss and damage. The bureaucrats started reacting, the Danish bureaucrats saying, oh, what the minister said was in a different context and so forth. But luckily, the same prime minister with a broader coalition government behind her has reiterated that position. Denmark is for this loss and damage, has to be solved. We cannot come and tell a country like India or other developing nations what to do. We cannot preach and teach. Therefore, this idea of saying that you should stop using coal, for instance, here in India, it's a wrong way, seen from my point of view and my government's point of view. We can't tell you to stop using coal. What we can do, and what we are doing through something we call the Green Strategic Partnership, is really to inspire and don't miss out the word inspire. We like to inspire India, like many other countries who are on the trajectory towards a more green economy. Inspire you to look into what kind of technologies, skills, as your Prime Minister has called it in our context, what kind of skills have we had? What have we developed? What kind of practices have we developed? What kind of experiences have we gained, and so forth? That's the way forward, literally, to inspire a country, a nation like India, to invest even more in the greening of its economy. And therefore, this word of green growth, one of the 7 priorities put into the union budget proposal, is so important, because that is a clear, significant step that will lead a country, a nation like India, really to evolve in a more greener way. India does it because India thinks it's the right way. Nobody has forced India to do it, and nobody forced your Prime Minister to mention the 500 gigawatts of ambitions on renewables and so forth. It is a political choice. Back in the early 1970s, we had no choice. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the way forward, really to take action. And therefore, when your Honorable Prime Minister launched this Mission for Life, the 20th of October last year, that is really coming to the core of my own passion, because you can ask all these brilliant people up there, you can ask all of yourself to do a lot of things, you can ask your government, you can ask the UN system to help you out. But if you do not take individual responsibility, then we will not be able to solve any of these issues, whether it's about climate, whether it's about the SDGs as such. So it's time really for action. Let me conclude by mentioning the Green Strategic Partnership between Denmark and India. And that is a bridge. It's not a divide. It's a bridge because it's based on no teaching, no preaching. It has 5 S's. Scale of India. You can call it the scale of Global South if you would like to do that. Scale is not just how many people, the length of the coastal line, things like that. It's about the capabilities and capacities and the talents that you will find in a country and a nation like India. But it's also skills. And Honorable Prime Minister said, India has the scale, Denmark has the skills. And we always add that India has a lot of skills as well. That goes for all the developing countries as such. Then we added speed, because we have the Sustainable Development Goals. We have to deliver on them by 2030. And we can't just ignore it. COVID really forced us into a setback. And now we are all investing in too many different things, which basically will not help the fight against the climate changes and poverty and all that. So speed is there. Then scope, what Denmark and India we do, should not only be for our bilateral kind of benefit, it has to go beyond. And therefore, the way in which we're working has to be kind of bridge between what India is doing and what we are doing. And finally, we added the 5th S, which has now been translated into green growth, called sustainability. So if you really will build up a fundament so you can reduce the divide, then you have to have these 5 S's, apply them, work along these ideas, and that's the only way forward. Last but not least, I will say, coming back to COP15, where we committed really to pay these 100 billion of dollars. In fact, Denmark has decided last year to honor our contribution of these 100 billion dollars, so that you can find in our budget proposal and our budget law. So we are not only talking, but we are also walking. So when you are falling asleep, after a lengthy but not boring speech, but based on the 5 S's, don't forget the green tie. Yes. It means a lot. Thank you very much, and keep up the spirit. Dhanyavad.